All right, welcome everybody. This is getting started in data governance with Microsoft Fabric. This is an interesting topic. Data governance, not the sexiest or most popular topic, but I can tell you I've delivered this talk twice now, and in both times I've had full rooms. People do care about data governance and data quality. It's kind of made a comeback. I know Mark was talking about a lot of Lenny Lobel doing talks on AI and such, and a lot of things we see that I see in AI around retrieval augmented generation and stuff depends highly on having good data quality and data integrity. Aside from that, security has an interesting role in data governance nowadays. Uh, One of the tenets of GDPR is that you need to identify your sensitive data and know where it is and that kind of thing. And you can reduce your fines in the event of a data breach if you simply can isolate what data sets were breached by knowing where they are. So that has kind of given data governance a new life. And one of the interesting things and notions about Fabric that I think is pretty cool is getting all of your data into one place, whether it be in a warehouse, a Delta Lake or a data lake, a one lake, one stream, what all the fancy words that make up Microsoft Fabric, is it gives us a better footprint to do governance. And we're going to talk in this talk, I'm going to talk a lot about process around governance and how it really can't be something that IT drives exclusively. It has to be driven by the business organization. But we are going to talk about some of the tooling that's involved in the options you have in Fabric and how Fabric can start to integrate with Purview in some of this newer model to provide high levels of governance and kind of in security. And something that came up earlier while we were just chatting pre-meeting is Unity Catalog, because one of the things that Fabric recently introduced is support for mirroring Unity Catalog from Databricks, and I think they're two very different products, and we'll talk about that throughout this talk. I'm Joey D'Antoni. If I haven't met you or you don't know me, I'm principal cloud architect at DesignMine. I've been working in data and data platforms for over 20 years. My data experience with this Lakehouse and type stuff goes back a good 15 years. I did a lot of Hadoop work in my early days when I was at Comcast Cable. I've been a Microsoft Data Platform MVP since 2013. I'm a VMware vExpert. I've written a few books on SQL Server and various other technology topics. And I write a monthly column for Edmund Magazine called Joey on SQL Server. It's not always on SQL Server. Actually, this month it's going to be on Fabric internals, so be on the lookout for that. Technology plays a significant role in helping institutions manage things, but at the end of the day, it's the behavior of the people using the technology that determine whether data is being used to drive institutional success. And we talk about data governance, which is really about controlling the way people behave with regards to data and data technology. Specifically, it identifies the appropriate people to steward and govern various types of data. It sets policies and rules of behavior. It embeds those rules into everyday processes across the institution. We're going to talk about a lot of things, and I do like the level set here, and this is one of the reasons why I used the NIST definition here on this slide. If you're not familiar with NIST, they're the National Institutes of Standard and Technology. They do a pretty good job of helping us define a lot of technology terms. They also have a really wonderful definition of cloud computing that I like to use. But this helps us kind of have a standard definition. I like to say there are a few pillars of data governance. There's data quality, there's data security, and there's data access. But there's a little bit more to it than that. We'll break down each of those individual components and where they fall and how you can build a data governance organization to help maintain those things. So let's talk about the compliance and the security aspects of this. Your organization needs to be ready to be able to address regulatory compliance and industry mandates. This can include regional mandates like the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, or the California Consumer Privacy Act. Some of these industry mandates include financial reporting and accounting transparency, like Sarbanes-Oxley, or healthcare data policy, things like HIPAA. And data governance is one of the clear ways we do this by helping achieve these goals of regulatory compliance. We have a data governance framework, and this is going to really help us define and classify requested data for those regulations, define how and why and where your company accesses and uses that data, uh, how to manage appropriate security rights within the organizations, including data subject consent, uh, evaluating risk exposure, and how you can remediate that risk with security controls, and identifying these key concepts and regulatory concerns. There's kind of an interesting aspect to data security and how it relates to governance, because one of the key aspects that I think it's helpful to understand is that every time you add a security control to a process, it makes everything harder. Let's say I decided to build a moat around my house. Well, I now need a boat or a bridge to cross that moat every time I want it. Or if I add multi-factor authentication to an app, every time a user needs to log in, they either need to have a phone handy or something like a YubiKey or a secure ID. You don't want to necessarily lock down every process in your organization. You might simply want to have lower value data that doesn't need to be as protected, less scrutinized, and under less control. The other aspect of that is by doing those sorts of things, it allows you to more tightly audit and monitor that data that does need to be secured and put higher controls around those, because in theory, that data is less frequently accessed. And you're limiting the amount of auditing you have to do. So it's really just kind of a scope management thing, but data governance can really help with security. And one of the things we like to talk about and is an early thing in Fabric, and unfortunately it's still not perfect, but it's there, is data labeling. And this is going to tie into a broader data loss protection story that Microsoft's going to tell around Purview. So when we have that classification around data and we have labeling, we can better apply policies. We're going to talk a lot about tools and various techniques like labeling and tagging and things like that. But one thing I want you to know is that, and you'll hear me say this a bunch of times tonight, data governance isn't about the tooling, it's about the process. The tooling is there to facilitate the process that the organization drives. Uh, but the tooling is not the end all be all. And the tooling is better. And I think one of the things you'll see with Purview is they've done a good job of, trying to do things like metadata scanning and reducing the amount of manual effort to implement process, but you still have to implement that process. And this is my Venn diagram of data governance. And data security is a component of data governance, and this is focused specifically on protecting data. The data might be from unauthorized access, at risk, or data corruption, or data breaches, or ransomware attacks, like we see so much in the news lately. But we aim to ensure data confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is known as the CIA triad in security circles. Data security is going to employ various methods like encryption, tokenization, access controls, network security, possibly even moats. I know of an Azure data center that has a moat around it. But when we ensure adherence to this compliance and these regulations, it's gonna be both ethical concerns and privacy concerns for our customer. We're in today where we have, data breaches are not uncommon at all. Maintaining that privacy is paramount. It involves, implementing those controls, ensuring data is used for its intended purpose, and providing individuals with control over their personal data. Likewise, we have concerns about data quality. I've worked with a number of customers throughout the years who have, and you can always tell there's a data quality problem when any kind of period end process, like year end, quarter end, month end, involves downloading the data into Excel spreadsheets and then fixing the data. And that's something that in the number of I've probably implemented data quality programs or data governance programs in probably 4 or 5 different customers throughout the years. And that is always a common trait. When you see heavy use of Excel and end of quarter, it means that there isn't a great single source of the truth. They're having to adjust things coming out of operational systems. Not great from an audit perspective, and definitely not good from a data quality and consistency perspective. Then finally, usability. So one of the things that I think good data governance helps clients make better decisions around their using their data. So making those data-driven decisions, because if you don't know what data sets you have, and especially in larger organizations, and this is where things like data catalogs can really come into play. If you don't have good cataloging and users don't know what data sets are available, that's a common problem. I did some marketing work for Databricks a couple of years ago, and this is in the early days of Unity Catalog. And one of the things they were really advertising it for, and the work I did there was for the Department of Defense, where you had all of these different organizations within the DoD that needed to share data, but they were concerned about sharing data with the other team, and then B, they needed a framework and everything for to share that data. So making that more usable and making that process smoother is another key aspect of governance. So one of the things I like to talk about is how, and you'll hear me say it over and over again, data governance is not an IT problem. IT is involved in the problem, but if IT is trying to drive data governance, that effort is never going to be successful. IT can govern its own data. So when I worked at Comcast, I had to help solve a number of problems. And one of the biggest ones I had to come up with was figuring out a way to identify what a given server in a given data center cost us and how much, like, let's say, a terabyte of storage cost in that same location. This was a trickier effort than you can imagine. Lots of variables, lots of confounding factors, and eventually I kind of came up with a model, built a data warehouse around it, collected a lot of data, and reported it. I was pretty qualified to write that model. It wasn't perfect, but it was close. But my background is in infrastructure architecture, right? So I had the skills to do that. If I had to write a governance procedure for how to protect our customer data or our vendor data, I would be at a loss, because how do I know what the rules are around customer data? How do I know how the business needs to use that customer data? These are all things that need to drive down from the business. And realistically, this needs to come from an executive, and we'll talk more about that on the next slide and how we organize a data governance program, because there's a lot of structure to this. It's not something as simple as buying Purview and buying Fabric. If it was, everybody would have high quality data and have it properly locked down. A well-engineered data governance program is typically going to include various roles, and this is going to be that senior executive who oversees the program. That senior executive is going to drive a governance team that manages the process. It's also going to have a steering committee that can act as the governing body, and a group of data stewards that are cross-functional people that live in each function of the business. And they work together to create the standards and policies for governing data, as well as the implementation and enforcement procedures that are primarily carried out by those data stewards in their organizations. And ideally, those executives and other representatives from the business operations will take part, and IT will be involved and help run the program by providing frameworks and tooling. But it's not an IT total problem. That's an important thing to understand. And data governance is really a core component of your overall data management strategy. Organizations need to focus on the expected business benefits of a governance program for it to be successful, starting in the early days of an initiative, because otherwise you're not going to see it. And outcomes can't just be good governance. There have to be better business outcomes from it. So, and that's going to be making better business data-driven decisions that help your business, act accordingly. So we talked a lot, especially during the pandemic, about organizations undergoing digital transformations, and that was kind of a fancy way for a lot of organizations to say they were moving to Office 365 from hosted Exchange or something like that. Few organizations, I think, truly embraced, and there were some, but very few organizations truly embraced, a real digital transformation, where they were, making big changes to their business process. And a few did and were very successful with it. But data governance does require a culture. Like, it has to have an organization that understands the value of high quality data for business partners and stakeholders. Just to give you an idea of an example of what can happen when that doesn't happen, I did have a customer uh, where we worked to implement a data warehouse project. And when we got there, the issue at the start, it was a family-owned business, but a reasonable size one, tens of millions of dollars a year in sales. Their problem was they wanted to sell the company. They wanted to, the children wanted to get out and they wanted to sell the company to whoever would buy it. But they didn't have a good way of valuing the company because their data was so poor. This is kind of a clear example of a value that maybe not the best one when they just want to unload the company, but it is an example of how the importance of having high quality data. Business leaders need to understand that, data governance is more than just a compliance and security function, but it's also a accelerator of business value to get sponsorship and shared accountability. And I think what's going to be a driver of this in the next few years is probably the whole, and I hate to say the word because it's such a buzzword, but AI, like having quality data to support the AI applications that you're building in your company is going to hopefully avoid situations like the thing that happened with the Canadian airline where they priced tickets at $50 or something. Having that narrow data set and quality data set and refined and approved data set to drive your AI processes will be helpful. Those data owners and data stewards, they're going to be the ones who cultivate active engagement, and they're going to instill purposeful ownership with data leaders that have expertise in their domain context. It's kind of what I was trying to say earlier. When I was at Comcast, I could be the data governance person for our servers and our infrastructure costs because I had a really firm understanding of what that domain looked like and how those things work. I didn't understand our customer profile. I didn't understand our vendor profile. Those are the people who work in procurement and sales. They have to manage those kinds of contexts. And this is why this is such a cross-functional process. And this is why it's really such a difficult process. And there are some practice principles you can use to accelerate that journey. And the key thing is to anchor this in business value, and that's where you get that executive support. A lot of times it comes out of potentially a compliance issue where you got fined, or maybe, you're trying to reduce another common pattern around data governance projects is you're trying to reduce the time for month end, year end, quarter end closing processes because the data is so messy that it requires a lot of manual intervention. So those are typically the two most common patterns that I've seen. There may be some, like I mentioned, around AI, but you want to start with that business pattern because you really do need that executive support. You want to think big, like you want to govern all the data in the business, but you want to start small with a small subset of data. Uh, and this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. Uh, and I always tell people, don't go out and buy a tool as the first thing you do, build a team. That's really more important as we're about to talk about tools on the forthcoming slide. But think big, start small. So think about that cross-functional team. In my experience, you want to start with the most motivated team. And typically that's going to be accountants, uh, just based on the projects I've done in this space. But at the same time, uh, you want motivated people who are willing to help facilitate this project. Progression over perfection. One of the things, if you're a perfectionist, data governance is going to be a really not fun project for you because it's always messy, it's always ugly. Even when you get master data and data quality stuff in place, there are always exceptions. It's a little bit messy. The goal is to be right, consistently and improving. And this is a team sport, like I've mentioned. It needs to be cross-functional teams working together, IT providing support, but the business kind of driving that effort. All right, let's kind of shift gears and start to talk about some tools. Uh, we'll kind of dive deeper into the way things are implemented in Fabric and how Purview ties in. Uh, and I apologize because I updated this slide and my update didn't show up, but I'll talk about the tool I wanted to mention. The first one here is external data catalog. So there are a number of data catalog products There's an Apache data catalog product, which is, my understanding, is what Microsoft Purview is based on. Irwin's a tool I like to talk about because a lot of organizations don't do data modeling anymore, especially for, or they fully use third-party apps, or so they don't worry about having data models. Data models can drive a lot of data governance for you because you can tie in a lot of metadata and additional information about what that data is. Talend has a pretty full suite of data governance tools, including a data catalog. The bullet I wanted to add on the slide that's missing is Databricks in Unity Catalog. And Unity Catalog is an interesting tool. I think it's gotten a great deal of popularity because it's relatively easy to implement. Databricks, kind of like Databricks. Databricks is, I think, for a Spark tool, is something that's relatively easy to use. It's abstracting a lot of the complexity that you would see using native Spark, and Unity Catalog does a good job of extracting a lot of the complexity that's inherent in data governance processes. It's not necessarily the end-to-end tool that some of these other tools, specifically Purview, aim to be. I have Fabric in brackets there because it does have some limited data governance componentry in and of itself. There's some stuff around data lineage, and you can see the history, and we'll walk through that. And then finally, Purview is going to be the main thing we're going to talk about here, and the Purview integrations with Fabric, because I think they're pretty powerful, and it's going to be the way going forward. So one final slide kind of on process before we start talking about some of these concepts. As your data users and consumers keep growing, having a small data governance team can be challenging. This is one of those areas where there's a lot of interesting kind of theoretical discussion around service fabric, or excuse me, data fabric versus data mesh. Service Fabric's a different Azure thing. Sorry about that. I think it's data mesh is where the data organizations all do their own governance locally. And I think there are some kind of interesting arguments to be made there into how you structure your data organization. And once again, that's going to really depend on the nature of your organization and how focused on data they are. But a better approach is to have bottom-up data management that makes those data creators responsible for their own data governance. And this is really building data governance processes into your data organization. And typically, an organization that's going to do this is going to have a chief data officer. They're going to be making very data-driven decisions, and they're going to be very focused on having high-quality data. But beyond data compliance, which is frequently the first thing we talk about when we talk about governance, governance makes for better decision making by providing more accurate data. And it's not simply the data quality here that plays in. It's the fact that your users trust your data because they know you have a process, and over time they've seen the quality of that data. They don't see a lot of data errors in the organization. Your data functions well. This prevents arguments. Do we actually trust this data? Are these numbers right? If everybody in your organization knows your data is trustworthy, you're consistent, you're getting good sources, you're getting data from blessed and holistic sources. That's really going to help your organization drive better data-driven decision making. So let's talk about some of these components of data governance here. So we have our data, and this is kind of a good example of how we're going to highlight things. So we have a set of data that's books. We have a data catalog that's library. Within that library, we have our business domains. Although here we're going to say history, but if we look at the business example, we can say sales, finance, and HR. And we could have a customer master list. But we can have these data products that come out of these books. And let's talk about what each of these things mean. So data governance is really a robust framework for that enterprise scale governance, and the functions include data catalog. And the process of data cataloging and discovery includes maintaining a physical record of the organization's metadata in data assets in a unified and scalable manner. That catalog is going to enable automatic identification of data sets, descriptions, logical search, and discovery. That metadata is going to include technical properties of the data set as well as business properties. Technical properties include data schema and structure, physical location, data type, format, approximate size, and the lineage of that data. The business metadata may include related glossary terms, who owns the data stewards, data classifications, and more. That catalog is going to be that centralized collection of that metadata, and it's going to offer a unified view of to manage the organization's data. And that catalog is going to be crucial for meeting those regulations, but it's also going to provide insights to understand how the data is being created and how it's used across the data estate. At a minimum, a data catalog should have the following features. Onboard dataset metadata. That metadata should update regularly, automatically, and at scale. Ideally, we're going to use automated features like data source scanning to do this, and that'll capture all the technical metadata, including lineage. A catalog should curate and enrich. After that metadata has been onboarded, the catalog should enable dataset owners and stewards to enrich the metadata with any business-specific format information, including glossary terms. It should also enable automatic classification for effective security. It should also enable data discoverability and evaluation. That catalog should allow users to effectively browse for data sets across the technical metadata. It should also allow users to quickly and easily evaluate data sets to see if they're fit for an intended purpose. This can be done by allowing dataset previews, showing lineage information, data sensitivity, and so on. That metadata synchronization, large organizations should have may have several divisions, subsidiaries, or companies with different data catalogs that use one or several technologies. So it's common to see data discovery tools that work across the whole enterprise. This approach isn't aligned with the idea of having a centralized and discovering cataloging mechanism. Rather, it's specific and constrained data discovery. So this idea of kind of having a library is just a good way to think about what your process should look like. So Fabric gives us a few ways to start to have some level of data governance. And we're going to talk a lot about Purview later, but let's talk about some of the basic things. So the Microsoft Fabric admin portal is the central place that allows you to control your overall Fabric estate. This includes settings that govern Fabric. So if you want to make changes to tenants, govern capacities, domains, and workspaces, or control how users interact with Microsoft Fabric, this can all be done through that portal. And that portal gives us a few things. So we have a domain. A tenant is our scope of authentication. That's the first thing to kind of think about. Tenant in Fabric, same thing as tenant in Azure. It's tied to a Microsoft Entra ID tenant. So your authentication models and most of your security, overarching security, platform level security options are going to be inherited from your Microsoft Entra ID. There's a lot there in terms of features that you can do, conditional access policies, and limit who has access and enable guest users and things like that. The other thing we have in Fabric is a domain, and a domain is a way of logically grouping together all the data in an organization that is relevant to a particular area of field. One of the most common ways domains are used is to group data by business department, making it possible for departments to manage their own data according to specific regulations, restrictions, and needs. To group data into domains, we're going to use workspaces. And if you're not familiar with Power BI or Fabric, workspaces are kind of analogous to resource groups in Azure. It's just a way of grouping resources, and typically it's used as a security boundary, and it can be commonly used as a project boundary. So we have a tenant, we can have multiple domains, and each domain can be made up of one or more workspaces. The association of workspaces and their items with domains is really designed for a consumption experience. For example, in the OneLake Data Hub, users can filter content by a domain that is relevant to them. There are also some tenant level settings that can be delegated to the domain level for its domain-specific configuration. We also have metadata scanning, and this facilitates the governance of your organization's fabric data by making it possible for cataloging tools to report and catalog that metadata of those fabric items. Uh, it uses this by a set of REST APIs that are collectively known as the scanner APIs. The scanner APIs extract metadata like name, ID, sensitivity, endorsement status, which we'll talk about on the next slide. And then finally, Purview. And we had some questions earlier around the differences between Purview and Unity Catalog. I think what Microsoft's goals for Purview are, and it goes well beyond Fabric. And this is where it differs from Unity Catalog, which is kind of just a data catalog product. Purview aims to be an end-to-end kind of data catalog, yes, but also security and data loss prevention tool. So it's kind of almost like a holistic tool across your enterprise for data protection. So they're definitely playing more on the security angle, but there are some things that we'll talk about here in the next few slides about how Purview can enhance and provide scanning and stay up to date on your items that are in Fabric. So endorsement is a Fabric and Power BI feature that makes it easier for users in an organization to identify those high quality, trustworthy content and data sets. Endorsed items are clearly labeled in the UI with a badge, and sometimes they're in some lists they're giving precedence and are listed first. Uh, so that's endorsements. One of the things we have in terms of data governance tools that are just native to Fabric. In modern BI projects, understanding the lineage of data can always be a challenge. The challenge is even bigger if you've built, advanced analytical projects spanning multiple data sources, data items, and dependencies. Questions like, what happens if I change this data? Or why isn't this report up to date? Or it can be hard to answer. Frequently, this might require, your whole BI team or your whole data team to do a deep investigation to avoid that. And Fabric's Lineage view helps you answer these questions. So if you look in Lineage view, you can see all the items in the workspace and how they are connected to each other. You can also see upstream connections outside the workspace, one level up. You can tell if an item is outside the workspace because the name of the external workspace is indicated on the card. And we can see a couple of these below. And when you make changes to a Fabric item or considering making changes, the ability to assess the impact of those changes on downstream items that depend on that item are really important. So impact analysis provides you with the information that can help you make this assessment. Impact analysis will show you the workspaces and Fabric items that might be affected by your change. You can choose to see only direct children or all affected downstream items and workspaces. For data sources, you can only see direct children. To see further downstream items for data sources, you can use impact analysis on the direct children of those data sources. This provides a pretty easy way to notify relevant people about a change you made or thinking about making. For data sources, it shows you the connection string you can connect to the data source. I think there's some more governance that can be added to this potentially, and I haven't heard of any plans around that, but I could see where you could have, maybe approval workflows around this that would be kind of useful. Let's talk a little bit more about endorsed items in Fabric. So we have promoted items, and when an item has the promoted badge, it means that item creators can think the item is ready for sharing and reuse. Any Fabric or Power BI item except Power BI dashboards can be promoted. Any user with permissions on the items can promote it. Certified and master data carry a little bit more weight. So if an item has the certified badge, it means that the organization authorized reviewer has certified the item and that it meets the organization's quality standards, can be regarded as authentic and reliable, and is ready for use across the organization. Any Fabric user or Power BI, any Fabric or Power BI item except Power BI dashboards can be certified. Any user can request certification, but only users specified by the Fabric administrator can actually certify items. Master data, similarly, uh, if an item has the master data badge, it means the item is a core source of organizational data. The master data designation is used to indicate that a data item is to be regarded as the authoritative single source of truth for certain kinds of organizational or business data, such as product codes or customer list. The master data label can only be assigned to items that contain data, like lakehouses and semantic models. And like similar to certified items, only users specified by the Fabric administrator can label that item. Uh, One kind of interesting thing here is we still don't, and Microsoft kind of released master data management with SQL Server 2008 R2, and that kind of died on the vine. Uh, I don't know that I know there are some things coming that will assist with master data management in Fabric, but I don't think there's anything like inherent that's going to be right there to be a master data management system. So it's still going to be a little bit of a build your own solution. Uh, this is probably not the ideal tool set for that, but just be aware that is something that you may need to go external for. So let's talk about Purview and what it can do for around data governance. Data curation is the part of governance that involves like gathering that metadata, analyzing lineage formation, and all other sources that your organization uses. These sources can be on premises, they can be in third-party clouds, they can use third-party products or services like a CRM system like Salesforce. This extraction process is going to be referred to as scanning in Purview. All information is retrieved using built-in scanners in Purview that can scan your organization's data estate to collect that execution. In Purview, this is executed by something called data map. Purview's scanning engine can fetch and scan metadata from all sorts of sources. It exposes that metadata via alias APIs, so you can consume it via external services or software. And Datamap also integrates with Fabric and gets its metadata populated internally so that business users can search, find, and use those data products to build their insights. Currently, data customers can look at all Fabric workspaces that they have viewer access to, and this is known as live view. On top of that, manual scans can be executed on all Fabric items from Purview, where item level metadata is picked up and made available for use. This is only available for the enterprise tier of Purview. Uh, we also have data discovery tools, and data consumers are going to be able to find this through the concept of Purview domains. Uh, it's going to capture business-friendly terminology and groupings to help it easier to search to find those data items that they're familiar with. And then finally, Purview Data Catalog. And in the catalog, like we've talked about, it's going to expose that metadata from all sources across the platform. With Data Catalog, customers can search for the data and items they're involved in without having to know which systems are holding your data. All Fabric items are going to be available inside Purview. And in Purview Hub, we're going to have a centralized page within Fabric that's going to help Fabric administrators use and manage their data estate. It contains reports that provide insights about sensitive data and item endorsement. That sensitive data is going to be based on labeling, so it's important to label your data correctly. But if you're using labeling across your organization, like to tie into data loss prevention, this is where that's going to work quite well. Um, and it will also provide insight about item endorsement and serve as a gateway to more advanced capabilities in the government's Purview governance and compliance portals like data catalog, information protection, data loss prevention, and audit. And the Purview Hub has a view for both Fabric administrators and a view for regular Fabric users. The administrators are going to be able to see insights around their entire organization's data estate. whereas users will see insight about their own Fabric content and links to capabilities in the Fabric governance portal that will help them further identify their data. And this is the insight report, and this gives us a little bit deeper look. We have an overview report here, and this is an overview of distribution and the use of endorsements and sensitivity labeling. There's an endorsement report, and this will let us drill down and analyze the distribution and the use of endorsement. We have a sensitivity report. This will give us drill down and analyze distribution of any sensitivity labeling. Inventory, which is going to give us labeled and endorsed items. We can apply date ranges to that, filter by workspace. We have items, so we can look at items throughout the organization. And then finally, a sensitivity page, which is going to give us sensitivity labeling throughout the entire organization. So this is kind of where I hope you can kind of see Microsoft's going more holistic, I think, than Unity Catalog. So Unity Catalog, kind of strictly data catalog solution. There's a little bit more to it than that because it does establish some security for some items. We kind of have different frameworks of how we do that in Fabric through the use of domains and workspaces. And I think ultimately we're going to have to see where this aligns. One of the things about Fabric that I found interesting is if you just want something to change, just wait a couple weeks and it will change again. So I think you will continue to see this space evolve, but Purview is kind of an end-to-end audit, data loss prevention, security, and data management tool. So it's kind of going at it from all angles. And it's one of those cross-functional tools that a lot of teams at Microsoft have been involved in the building of. So I know I've said this too many times today, but I want to drive the point home. Data governance is a business function. So the ultimate objective is to generate the greatest possible return on your data. That framework is going to help you capture those critical opportunities to leverage your data and those data assets. People. So governance succeeds when there's collaboration and planning. People need to determine technology requirements. They need to define the policies and processes that drive the data governance outcomes to support their strategic activities. And there are some really important things to consider. Are your people committed to data governance? Have you formally defined their roles and responsibilities? Do they have the skills to do that? What is the data literacy like in your organization? Processes. Processes allow people to confirm that your data is managed correctly throughout the enterprise. This will ensure that your business processes draw on trusted data. Important points to consider include, are your data definitions, rules, and goals realistic and appropriate? Have you modernized your business processes? And did you review your business roles to investigate data governance? Contributors. Those are business and IT subject matter experts who provide necessary content. They're the business leaders, the process owners, and the data stewards that are going to run downstream and upstream processes that are impacted by your initiative. These folks can also include IT architects, systems experts, and can you identify your governance stakeholders? Do you know where the contributors are and where that expertise is maintained? One of the things you'll learn in governance is who your employees that really know how the business operates are, and those are the people that you want in your data governance processes because they know everything. The last bullet point here is technology, and I have it last for a reason. And these are the platforms, the tools, and the expertise that enable reliable governance processes. But the humans are way more important than the tools. The tools do help you automate some things. So tools like data profiling, Lineage, and metadata scanning let you automate and scale your processes because you can't scale those processes, especially in an enterprise. And some other important points to think about with your tools, is your tool like Purview capable of scanning out and scaling across the organization? And have you identified gaps there? One last tech slide. I just want to talk about the features of Purview that are kind of included with Fabric. This lets us see we have Purview data catalog, and this is going to provide that data catalog, that metadata scanning. Purview information protection is going to allow you to discover, classify, and protect data using sensitivity labels. Sensitivity labels can be set on fabric items, and this data is protected when it's exported via export paths. You can monitor for this. With metadata scanning, you'll be able to automate the process of that labeling. Data loss prevention is also going to apply into labels, and this can detect sensitivity labels and the most sensitive info types like credit card and social security numbers. These things aren't perfect. If anybody's used any metadata or data scanning features, they work about 90% of the time. Typically, you'll have weird patterns like data that's not in English, or national ID numbers that are in the format of a social security number that tend to break them. But this is something that's evolving over time. And then finally, audit. And with Purview Audit, all Fabric user activities are logged into the Purview audit log. And Fabric and Purview will continue to work more closely together, and you'll be able to see more solutions of this going forward. Well, data governance, just to kind of close up and wrap out, and then we'll take some questions. Data governance is not the most exciting topic, but it really is one of the most important to the success of your business and to the success of data initiatives within your business. Data governance, data quality, all very important topics. Establishing that governance framework is not an IT function, it's a business function. IT facilitates. A good example of this is Fabric, right? So you need the business to help implement Fabric so your processes can be a success. You don't want to necessarily have just IT implementing Fabric all by themselves. Likewise, Fabric with Purview, being able to understand the nature of that data, those rules, those are all important things. And having good data governance both includes improving your security and your compliance posture, but it also means you can deliver better business outcomes because you have more trusted data. You can just relax and rest easier and make better decisions. All right, my contact info, you can reach me at jdantoni@designmind.com too. But joey@joeydantoni.com, jdanton, joeydantoni.com is my blog, and redmondmag.com.